Good evening again, everyone. We're now convening as full council here this evening. I don't think we've got any members of the public present for this part of the meeting. Thank you. Any apologies for absence?
Oh, yes, Councillor Road and Councillor Schaefer, and both have prior work commitments.
Thank you. Do we receive and accept those apologies?
Agreed.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? We've got a number of minutes to look at. The preset meeting on the 17th of January. People should have been able to see that. Are people happy for them to receive those minutes?
Propose we agree.
Thank you. And similarly, the meeting on the 22nd of November, which was the last full council. Received those and no recommendations.
Agreed.
Interim minutes from the 20th of December. Those okay? Thank you. Planning committee, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could present the Planning Committee minutes from Monday the 29th of November, Monday 20th of December and Monday the 24th of January. The last one has a proposal from Councillor Stuchbury. Would you wish Councillor Stuchbury to?
No, you carry on, Chairman.
Right, in that case, seconded by Councillor Raft, to recommend to full council to undertake a footfall survey across the bridge from the Heartlands Park to the car park in order to ascertain the volume of pedestrians and cyclists who will have to cross that busy car park entrance to reach shops and other facilities. Partner organisations, including the Buckingham Society and Access for All, are to be invited to participate in the survey to improve signage or introduce mitigations to reduce the risk of accidents. That is the motion put before the council by the Planning Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Harvey.
I agree with the substance of the motion completely. I'd like to propose an amendment, though, is that we also research what plans are afoot or what will happen to that junction once the building is being completed, because it's going to be cars coming in and pedestrians coming in from all different directions. I'd like to have some confidence that somebody in the Shire Council is thinking about all this and drawing up a plan. So we at least ask them what plans are afoot, as well as do this.
Thank you. I don't know whether Councillor White was going to talk about that, because I did see something in the newspaper that alluded to it.
Thank you. So I was a little bit surprised to see this recommendation, because as far as I know, none of the relevant Buckinghamshire councillors have been advised of this. And this is a bridge that goes between two Buckinghamshire Council assets. So it would have been useful, I think, if the Planning Committee had perhaps shared their concerns with local councillors, because we might have been able to update the committee and those interested in this issue. But I can also update that earlier in January, I had a meeting with a council officer, two council officers, discussing the entrance area to the new care home and the interface with the pedestrian and cycleway access to that junction, because as Councillor Harvey's already suggested, the arrangement is less than satisfactory as it currently exists, and I was rather disgusted to see the initial proposal from the site applicant on the original proposal for that junction, which was wholly insufficient and did not meet the requirements of the planning case officer's report. I haven't received an update from the council officer as of today, but they are reviewing it, and I hope I can share that with the town council as soon as possible.
And can I just clarify that how this came about? At one of our planning meetings, a member of the public came to the public session expressing concerns about the junction, and she actually suggested that we undertake this survey. So that's where it came from. It came from a member of the public, and we decided to take it forward.
A point of order, Madam Mayor, it was actually at the full council on October the 13th. It's been a matter of public record since that date, so I'm surprised that Councillor White hasn't picked up on that.
Sorry, just as a point of order, I'm responding to the motion that's in this paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could expand, the
I
council sent that suggestion to the planning committee to consider as a motion for the next council, and that's why it's come back. It's there in the minutes on October the 13th.
Thank you. Councillor Stuchbury.
As I've caused the problem by raising motion, it is technically not quite correct. One of the people who proposed it was a Buckinghamshire councillor, so the idea that none of them knew about it isn't technically correct, but I understand the sentiment.
So, point of order, I said the ward count, the relevant Buckinghamshire Council.
All right, please, can you not interrupt me when I'm speaking unless the mayor wants me to stop speaking? Am I allowed to carry on speaking, or am I allowed to be interrupted?
I think what Councillor White was doing was clarifying that may have been a point of order, but yes, we do need to have one person speaking at a time.
Thank you. Can I carry on speaking? Is it okay? Thank you. The chair of the committee has outlined, the planning committee outlined the history behind it. The intention of the motion was not to be difficult, not to be outward and inclusive, because what it was intended to do, I believe, from the discussion at the meeting, was to look at this after and when the junction is completed, in the sense that at that point, to actually see whether anything at that point needed to be improved in consultation with Access for All and all other appropriate people in that session. It wasn't to deliberate, and this authority has the right to make a decision about anything it likes without asking people like myself. You have the rights and you're standing orders, you're a sovereign body. So the idea that you could not have to do that is erroneous. It wasn't meant to offend anybody. It was meant to be that the history of that junction has been contested. The history of the application, as Councillor White rightly pointed out, has been difficult. I spent 23 minutes in the actual planning meeting when this application was going through, being questioned by the planning committee, as I called it in, and I spoke about it as a district councillor at the time. So I have been involved in it, and it is a town centre matter and it affects the town. So I don't think it's in any way meant to offend anybody in any way, shape or form. It's just a simple thing to try and improve that junction after and when the application is completed.
Thank you, Councillor Stuchbury. Councillor White.
Just as a point of reply, if I may, the point I was making is that the committee could, and the councillor opposite, could have contacted the ward councillors if there was concerns raised, and we would have been, I would have been able to update the relevant councillor rather sooner, and we could have perhaps got a much better recommendation if the facts had been ascertained prior to rushing to a motion at the planning committee. This isn't the town centre committee, this is the planning committee.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
I think, with due respect to Councillor White, as Councillor Mark Cole said, it was taken from full council to planning committee to discuss and bring back to full council. If Councillor White hasn't either read the minutes of those meetings, which have been circulated to everybody, then to say that you didn't know about it is
Sorry, can I do a point of clarification?
excuse me.
I was this motion.
Councillor Davies was speaking. When she's finished, maybe we can go back to you, and then Councillor Harvey as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't remember what I was going to say now because I was interrupted and I've lost my chain of thought. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Can we please affirm our standing order is that if we want to speak, we wait until a councillor stops speaking, catch the attention of the chair of the committee, including theirs we've got at the moment, and then we speak. We do not interrupt. So can we please stop this interrupting now and end it now?
Thank you. Are we ready to vote on this proposal? So we have a proposed and seconded motion on the table. Councillor Harvey.
I do have an amendment, if anybody wants to second it. but I'm happy for it to fall if nobody does. My amendment was that we write and find out more information about just what is being planned.
Thank you, Councillor White.
I'd be happy to support that amendment, but I have just given a verbal update on that, so it may be superfluous.
Does anybody else want to comment on, have we got a seconder for the amendment?
Well, just saying, I'm happy to support the amendment, but
Okay.
I've just given a verbal update, so I don't know if the amendment is still needed or not.
And also, just to clarify, having been at the meetings when this was discussed before, the reason it's come back to full council from the planning committee was that we wanted to engage everybody on the council, because it will be quite an undertaking to have people on taking these numbers for a number of hours, possibly on 2 separate days. So that's, I think, is that the correct summary of why it came back here?
As the proposal in the motion, can I just say that the discussion, which the webcast is available, was about including all the Buckinghamshire councillors in that conversation, and included in that consultation, and including the local board members in it. That was the whole tenure of the conversation, was an inclusive, unifying, because we recognised that we were making a recommendation which they would need to be involved in. And that was the whole point of it. And that's why we said suitable people involved in it. And it was not meant to cut a snipe at anybody. It was meant to be an inclusive thing.
Thank you. Councillor, did I see your hand up, Councillor Davies first? Or?
I was going to say that I thought that Councillor Harvey's proposal that we wait, that we find out what is proposed, and Councillor Stuchbury's proposal that we wait and see what they've actually done, seem to countermand each other, and we need to make a decision which way we go on that.
So we probably, Councillor Rolfe and then Councillor Mordew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can just inject a note of positivity into the conversation, if I may. When these sorts of situations arise between different agencies, the town, the county, the transport for Buckingham and so on and so forth, because you can imagine all sorts of people could have a little finger in the pie. We so often turn around and say, where's your evidence? You know, why? So if we actually do this, it helps Councillor White, it helps the town council, it helps everybody to actually prove the difficulties, the congestion, the flow, and so on and so forth. And so it's nice to be on the front foot when we're actually considering, you know, a riposte. If we're told, no, we can't have this or that, we can point to some facts. And that, I think, is really at the heart of it all.
Thank you. Councillor Mordew.
I was wondering who's actually going to undertake the survey. Will it be town council staff? So you have to pay for an organisation to come in. It's just that when toilets were proposed there, it was not considered necessary to have any survey, and the bridge was still there and the shops were still there. So is it really worth spending expenditure? We've got no idea what it'll cost.
Thank you. I think
Just to clarify, my understanding of the motion is that where it says partner organisations, including the Buckingham Society and Access Road, to be invited to participate, was that those organisations, along with any interested councillors, would do it on a voluntary basis. That was I think that was the intention of the motion.
Hour a day.
So we've got the proposed amendment. Do we want to vote on the amendment? Can you just read out again, or have we got the wording for that, so we know exactly what we're talking about?
So Councillor Harvey said he agreed with the substance, but he proposed an amendment. And the question is, what will happen at that junction? And do we need to write and find out what the specific plans are?
Before we conduct the survey, is that?
No, at the same time.
At the same time. Okay. So can we vote on that proposed amendment? Those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Those against? Any abstentions?
1.
Okay, thank you. So that amendment is carried. So we now move on to the original motion as amended. Those in favour of that, please show.
1, 2, that's unanimous. That's unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. So moving on to Town Centre and Events Committee.
Madam Mayor, we haven't yet approved planning,
Oh, sorry.
There's quite a lot of meat.
We have got a lot of meetings. So can we receive and approve these 3 planning committee meetings? Thank you.
And very well chaired indeed they were.
And we will want you to support as many councillors as possible when this survey is conducted. Town Centre and Events Committee, Councillor Stuchbury.
Yeah, I'd like to prevent the minutes of the Town Centre Events Committee. A joyous affair it was, and hope that we agreed.
Yep.
Agreed.
And the Environment Committee.
Yes, to present the minutes of the meeting of Monday, the 6th of December. There are no recommendations.
Councillor O'Donoghue, Resources Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. To receive the minutes and to confirm the recommendation therein from the resources meeting held on Monday, 10th of January, that members agreed to recommend a revised version of standing orders to full council with the insertion of additional paragraph at 3Y regarding virtual attendance at meetings by councillors.
Thank you. So
Just point of information for the town clerk. Does that, when we agree that, does that agree it? Or should we have the entire standing order before it when we agree it?
Well, you have the entire standing order.
That is it. So
and I just highlighted in that document what's being changed. You do have the full document.
okay, that's fine.
So those in favour of agreeing the revised edition of standing orders, please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Moving on, item 9, the action list.
Just while you're scrolling through, just to note some of the links don't work on the agenda. And that's a system change last week, and we did our best. But next week, it will be up and running.
If you notice.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the 27th of September last year, this council wrote to the Police and Crime Commissioner, Matthew Barber of Thames Valley Police, following a motion which I proposed, asking why they had wasted £14.4 million of taxpayers' money in pulling out of the IT venture, and also why counter closure, what the situation was over counter closures, given that Thames Valley Police itself noted that 51%, the majority of those taking part in the consultation, were opposed to it. We've had no reply to date, and I note from tonight's action list under 35321, no response has yet been received. Could we, as a council, write to the Thames Valley Police Commissioner and deplore his discourtesy to Buckingham Town Council, which pays with its taxpayers a precept towards supporting him and his force, and demand an answer to both our questions?
Yes, I agree.
Councillor Harvey.
If we're seeking to, in a sense, make a complaint about the PCC and its absence of responding, then perhaps a more appropriate person to write to would be the chair of the Police and Crime Panel, which is a body of councillors that are there meant to be holding the PCC to account. So if we're going to write to the PCC, I think my view would be we write to the Police and Crime Panel and copy in the PCC. That would be my proposal. So it's
Makes sense.
It's a variation on.
Makes sense, John.
That all sounds sensible, but I do wonder, have we sent a follow-up just on the off chance the original letter was misplaced?
Yeah, so two things. Firstly, when the email was sent, I did get an immediate acknowledgement of receipt, and I did send a follow-up in November as well that has not been received. No response to that.
It's disappointing to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Stratford.
Don't be offended, it's common. I met him in a fire authority meeting, asked him a question about arson, and asked for an update, and he gave me his card, and I emailed him and I didn't get a response. So he's either very, very, very busy or he's not keeping up with his emails, which is regrettable. I don't think it's a slight on us. I think it's probably latter, that you can imagine how many emails he gets in a day. I can't prejudge him at this stage, but I think it's awfully bad manners not to respond to probably one of, if not the oldest, the second oldest council in Buckinghamshire, with the longest legs of standing. If you go by the Lord Lieutenant's list.
Thank you. I don't think we do need to take this forward. We can't just ignore this issue because it's important. So we've got the suggestion that we write again to the Police and Crime panel with a copy to the Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm just wondering whether it would be better to send an old-fashioned letter rather than an email, or possibly both. Maybe an old-fashioned letter might go down better. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, just to say that the chair of the Police and Crime panel is Councillor Marilyn Davis from West Oxfordshire District Council, and the representative from Buckinghamshire Council is Councillor David Carroll. So it might be worth copying in David Carroll, as he's asked a local member, as it were, of the Police and Crime panel, but also writing officially to the chair. The name is Councillor Marilyn Davis from West Oxford.
So those in favour of that approach?
That's unanimous.
Thank you. So Town Clerk, over to you for the action on that. Thank you. Is there anything else that we want to pick up from that isn't already on the agenda from the action list? No? Okay. We move to item 10. Which is a motion proposed by Councillor Stuchbury and seconded by Councillor Rowe.
Quite happy for you to read the motion out, and I'll speak to it, Madam Mayor, if you want to.
So the motion is, it is proposed that Buckinghamshire Town Council declare 2022 as the year of the tree in Buckingham. Our many mature trees contribute to the natural environment of the town, and in their role, lowering the carbon footprint of Buckingham by extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We've already lost many substantial trees through the planning process, and other trees continue to be discussed for removal. So it's important to seek the community support in monitoring the well-being of these trees within the community, taking personal ownership of their well-being, albeit not in any way the financial or legal ownership. Although everyone is working to plant new trees within Buckinghamshire, it seems a contradiction to be removing so many mature trees at the same time. In doing so, the valuable service they render in sequestering carbon dioxide is lost, and additionally, the carbon within the tree is released as they decay, a double loss. There is a necessity, therefore, to encourage community ownership of our beautiful canopy and arboretum of substantial trees in Buckingham.
Thank you, ma'am. I speak to for the reason for the motion is, after discussion with Councillor Anthony Rowe, is we have constantly joined the planning committee to see trees being removed. The trees that we've seen removed throughout just the period, we lost a load of trees at Page Hill, we lost a load of trees down Chandos Road recently, within reasonable close memory. And there seems to be a common theme in this. Now, whatever the planning committee and the planning authority take a decision on these trees, if we don't make a statement about how important they are for the carbon footprint, how important they are to the visual look of Buckingham, if you wind back 10 years on with what's going on now, we could lose substantial canopy at Buckingham, and Buckingham would have as fewer trees as Aylesbury. And if you look at the landscape of Aylesbury, it isn't as green as what Buckingham is, because it was radically changed in the 1960s and redeveloped. And we didn't have that, fortunately. And we kept our street scene, our architecture, and all the things that we're proud of, including our avenues. So this is about us making a statement as a, not so much a political statement, but environmental statement about the importance of our trees and what they offer to the carbon. All the trees that are planted, fantastic, and especially the ones that we were all involved, those of us who were able to involve planting in the park. But they would take a long time before they drag in the carbon out of the atmosphere what a mature tree does. And we don't need to go into outside Buckingham where we've lost lots of trees, and we shouldn't bring that into the discussion, but we have lost a lot of trees in Buckinghamshire in recent years, and this is about a statement that we value them and just bring some ownership to it, that when people see a planning application or their neighbour wishes to remove the tree, that we take ownership for those trees, because they've got to be there for the next generation, and they've got to be there for them. Small boys should have trees to climb, in my opinion, and girls should be able to climb them as well. And if we take them down there, we'll have nowhere to climb and no trees to do. And what a sad world we'll all live in after that.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you. I think this motion is well-meaning, but I think it's perhaps badly timed. We've just commenced the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and the National Queen's Green Canopy, which is a national endeavour to replant and cherish our trees around the country. And I hate to seem to be undermining that. We should be concentrating on the national effort for this year. I'm also conscious that as part of that, Buckinghamshire Council is supporting the Green Canopy with the 70 for 70 project, which is where communities are encouraged to submit their favourite tree or trees in the county, which is another great way to promote some of our great mature trees. I myself have submitted Stowe Avenue as a great asset to the area. I also think it could do with being discussed with the Environment Committee, given the nature of the topic, just so we can actually flesh out what we actually mean and how we want to deliver the motion. Because it's great to have words agreed in a motion, but actually words without actions isn't particularly powerful. And it would be useful if perhaps this was referred back to the Environment Committee so we can actually discuss it in a little bit more detail and make sure that what does come forward is seen as a Buckingham specific and isn't seen to be clashing with other things that are happening at the moment. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor O'Donoghue.
Thank you, Mayor. It was an issue when I was chairman of planning, so either 2020 or 2021, and it was the request that it goes onto the agenda, every agenda, that we have a rolling idea of how many trees we're losing, so it's an issue. And I take on board what Councillor White says about Buckinghamshire Council, and yet whenever we point out that, you know, we don't want to lose these trees, we end up being overridden, and it's all because insurance companies would rather not pay out to householders, and our commitment is on the green trees, not on householders' sheds or conservatories. So I'm happy to support the motion, and I hope we take it seriously, especially with the green canopy. Let's hope Buckinghamshire Council supports us when we ask them not to remove a tree.
Thank you. Councillor Mordew.
The number of trees removed on page, I think, was 4, and they weren't mature. They shouldn't have been planted where they were in the first place, because as they grew up, they did cause subsidence. And I don't think anybody went into any of the houses where subsidence had occurred. And for every tree that was cut down, they're planting 2. What does concern me is taking things into community ownership. But if you take Moreton Avenue and you take the railway walk, they're all mature trees and in the ownership of the council anyway. And any valuable trees are listed. There's no arboretum, to my knowledge, being built in Buckingham, planted, I'd say. I think I agree with the sentiments, and I don't like seeing trees chopped down. You only got to walk down Moreton Avenue now, and you see the wind damage that's been caused. You can't take into community ownership what is on private land. All that happens is that you've got to buy the trees and maintain them. It's not as straightforward as it seems. You can take a building into community ownership, but to take a tree in, community ownership is different in law.
Just for information, the motion didn't actually say take it into ownership. It refers to and encourage people to take ownership of the trees in the sense of a good citizen would look after some vulnerable person. I think it isn't actually taking ownership. Let's not get carried away with taking on the responsibility.
Can I just come back on that, because community is a body of people. It's not an individual owner. So we're talking about the community of Buckingham, we're talking about the whole of Buckingham. If you're talking about the community of Page Hill, we're talking about a number of people live on Page Hill. If you're talking about one person, that's one person. There's no such thing as saying community ownership and not being a community.
Thank you. Councillor Cole and then Councillor Hetherington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I endorse what Councillor O'Donoghue, as my predecessor as Chairman of Planning, said, that there has been an ongoing dialogue with Buckinghamshire Council, before that with ABDC, trying to meet the tree officers, and for 10 months we have been asking for meetings, and for various reasons they keep putting it off, We have to take control of our trees. It's our town. It's not Aylesbury's town, it's not Buckinghamshire Council's town. We're getting mixed messages from down there. They will allow trees to be felled. Look at the destruction at Wagland Gardens, the destruction in Foscott Way on Page Hill. Yet on the other hand, with an area tree preservation order up at Plightle Crescent, the demolition of garages and the building of houses in their place have been refused because of potential damage to trees up there. So there's no joined up thinking between the planning department and environment down there, but we have got to take control of our trees, and until we do, more and more are going to be destroyed at the whim of people down at Aylesbury. They don't take notice of what we tell them. We oppose them, but they still override us, and it's not a situation that I'm at all happy about. So I will be voting in favour of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hetherington.
Well, very important trees do in fact have TPOs on them, but I see a lot of tree destruction is being caused by disease such as ash dieback and other diseases that are going around the trees, and also climate change. Councillor Mordew mentioned the gale damage. If anyone takes a walk down to Hyde Lane, the wood down there is almost completely destroyed from the gales we've had around the time of Halloween. And driving along the A421, there was a whole line of trees that were down. So there are huge threats to our trees, but it's not all from developers. Well, unless it's HS2, they seem to have carte blanche to them.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, then Councillor White, and then I think we need to.
I can speak after it, no motion.
Thank you.
Just to answer on the motion too, I think it's worth passing this motion, I hope, is adding a kind of thematic overview to the stuff that we talk about on various things, environment and planning in particular. And it will perhaps provide us with an extra oomph to object when a development is going to cut down trees. We've seen what's happened with McDonald's, is that the big, the foliage that was there on the roundabout has now disappeared, and all we now see is the kind of McDonald's building. And lots of trees were cut down in the process of building that as well. And it's insidious. There's a lovely tree that was opposite the mitre that was cut down, and Wagland's Gardens has already been mentioned as well. So the trees need us to protect them, and we should be doing everything we can, as well as planting new ones, which is great. We need to be on the side of trees.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Just to thank you for allowing me to come back for a second time. Just to clarify that if the planning committee has got difficulty in meeting a tree officer, then it would be useful to mention that to one of the Buckinghamshire Council Councillors, because we had a tree officer at our tree planting in Moreton just a few weeks ago. One of them actually lives in the area and is a very knowledgeable officer about the trees of Buckingham. So I am a little bit concerned if the planning committee has got one view of Buckinghamshire Council and its predecessors, and going back on a planning application maybe 10 years ago, such as Wagland Gardens, is not perhaps where we are now, because you just said that current applications are being seen in a different light. So perhaps we just need to be focused on the here and now. And I do ask the town clerk just to consider procedural matters on a motion that is very much within the area of a committee, to not allow a committee to the chance to discuss it and actually provide some actions to go with the motion. I find is a little bit odd. And not even to speak to the committee chairman about the motion until it appears on the agenda. It just seems like there's a bit, the motion proposer suggests there's no politics in this, but the fact that there was no discussion until it appeared on the agenda shows that perhaps there is some politics in this, which I think is not helpful with the town council or for best use of the committees within it.
Thank you. Can I just, the other thing, on a personal note, when I was first on the council, I was part of a town action commission about the loss of trees and hedgerows, and I think there have been, I don't think it's controversial, we obviously all are wanting to preserve our trees. When it's appropriate, sometimes they are diseased, as Councillor Hetherington said, or they are causing subsidence, but where possible, I'm sure we would all want to do that. And we do need actions attached to this. So I'm sure we will want to refer it back to Environment Committee to see what can be done, and to Planning Committee to see what can be done as well to strengthen our hand. And that discussion with the relevant department at Buckinghamshire Council is probably an important one as well. But back to Councillor Stuchbury.
I noticed Councillor Fran Davis hasn't spoken on this, so I'm willing to step back and speak last because it was my motion.
We then do need to call this to decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Stuchbury. I was thinking that hedgerows ought to be included with this as well. Hedgerows provide vital shelter for many of our birds and wildlife, as well as taking carbon out of the atmosphere, and they should be included alongside trees in this proposal.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to take that into the proposal. My seconder is happy to do that. Are you happy, Anthony? Just for point of information, when this motion was first proposed, it would have come to the council at the first meeting of the new year. It was dropped off the agenda because heavily in COVID, and it was felt that this shouldn't be wanted to be in the meeting as shortly as possible. And Madam Mayor felt that we should move it to the next meeting. That was agreed. It would have been before the actual planting of the trees and the celebration of the Queen. So this was never done in any way to, as I was corrected, Diamond Jubilee by Councillor Mari earlier today. It was a Platinum Jubilee, sorry. Earlier, I proposed the motion to the committee in the very sense that I did it and asked for a recorded vote, because I think this is an important issue. It's a statement about intent, it's a statement about our environment, and with the addition of hedgerows, which was missed out, and any councillor is entitled to put a motion on the agenda without referral to the committees. Otherwise, we will have a council, and we do not have to, as a council, await instructions.
Thank you. Town Clerk.
Yeah, just to comment on, not comment on the motion, but in terms of Councillor White's point about motions to council. Firstly, if the council wants to put something on a full council agenda, I will always take that motion unless there's a reason not to, unless it doesn't relate to this to the council, unless it relates to something which the committee is already dealing with. So, or the committee's made a decision. So we don't discuss minutes from committees because that's delegated, they've done it. But if it's doing the business of the committee, but not specifically about something of discussion, I'd always take that full motion to full council. The full council can immediately say, actually, we want that to go to the committee. So that's the first point. And also on this one in particular, it is a bit of a tricky one. It does kind of relate to environment, but also does relate to planning, because planning do have specific responsibilities about responding and considering TPOs and trees in terms of planning. And that's where some of these discussions around trees have taken place. So in a way, I think it is an appropriate one to come to full council. So that way, all councillors can just discuss it, and then if you want to send it to committee, you can do so.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Shall we move to a vote now, please?
Yes, please.
Those in favour of the motion, please show.
So recorded votes. Councillor Gately, Councillor Stuchbury, Councillor Mahi, Councillor Davis, Councillor Ralph, Councillor Hetherington, Councillor Hartley, Councillor Willett, Councillor Ahmed, sorry, the mask continues to say, Councillor Cole, Councillor O'Donoghue, and Councillor White.
Those against?
Against, Councillor Try,
And abstentions?
Councillor Mordew.
I'll say it's because it's a legal motion.
Thank you. That motion is carried. We move on. Sorry, Councillor White?
I don't want to raise a point of order, but perhaps the clerk could just come back to some of the issues that were. I'm just rereading the line because Howard raised the point about encourage community ownership. The proposer then said it wasn't in there. I've just reread the last sentence. It says to encourage community ownership.
Yeah.
So,
Can't do it.
so it would be useful to understand what the council will define that as, because that wasn't clarified in the debate that we just had.
Point of order.
Point of order, it's been discussed, you voted on. You might have voted on a resolution which is illegal and cannot be implemented, but that is up to the council to do.
I think my reading of that was that ownership in the sense of taking
It
responsibility.
doesn't say that.
But it doesn't say that. I take it.
Exactly. Legally, it says community ownership, which in law means one thing. What you voted on is taking it into community ownership, such as buildings and so on, which there is a part. What you want really is community responsibility, perhaps.
I would read it as the motion essentially says it's proposed that the Town Council declare 2022 as the year of the tree in Buckingham. The other text is explanatory about why that is proposed.
Correct.
The text around encouraging community ownership, I would say, isn't clear, and it's encouraging. And encouraging is not doesn't carry sufficient weight for me to have too much concern. So I don't think we've made a decision which will cause us any difficulty in law. In those terms.
The last paragraph it does.
Point of order. Point of order. We have had a decision made today. You have took a position as a council, which is your right to believe that it's incorrect. The vote has been cast. It seems very challenging to the town clerk, who has to put this on the agenda, who is our legal representative. And if it had been incorrect and he'd felt it had not been, he would not have put it on the agenda. So I propose we move next item.
Yeah,
No motion should be open to interpretation by the council. It should be
Can I-
clear and concise and to the point.
Can we move on, please? I think if we do need to come back, we'll bring it back at a future date.
can't.
We need to move on.
6 months.
Can
6
I-
months.
Sorry,
Can I just please say,
Councillor Davies.
sorry, Councillor Mordew had ample time, I believe, within that whole discussion to put that point across prior to the vote. He chose not to do so, and I believe that is not the way we should be working.
Well, he did point out, in fairness, that it did what it said. Councillor Wright.
I think, unfortunately, the response to my possibly point of order has actually misinterpreted what I was raising, which was I would like clarity from the town clerk to how we can implement this.
Is this a council meeting? We've had a move to the vote.
I'm not seeing Councillor Harvey jump in when Problem is interjecting, but it wasn't to reopen the debate, it was to ask the clerk to find out how we can implement this, because I suspect it's going to get referred to the Environment Committee in the main. And I'd like some steerage from the town clerk in due course. So this is all the point I was raising.
Thank you. I think that's helpful.
I mean, for my part at the moment, the motions, I took the motions primarily making a declaration of the year of the tree. Committees may take it further if they choose to.
Agree.
I'm not taking, there's nothing in there which says refer to the committee or for me to take any immediate action on that. I'm aware of.
Thank you, Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you. I'm not sure how we do this. Somebody's going to have to tell me about procedure. But could we just take the word personal ownership to personally?
I think
We've voted on the motion.
Forgive me if I may, because if there's some way of us doing this, we could just change the word ownership to interest. and the whole thing then shows it, but if it's too late or there's no procedural way of dealing with it, I should retire gracefully to my sitting backwards position.
We voted and we need to
Yeah,
move forward, and I'm sure the town clerk will guide us in the right direction.
Thank you very much.
What a sad day this is.
Councillor White.
It might be just helpful if the minutes just reflect the town clerk's guidance on that, just so that when we are referring to this, then we don't have to come back in 6 months.
Thank you.
Thank you, because I'm sure we're all, the mood of the meeting is that we want to protect our trees, and I don't think that's.
I think we're all agreed.
Here. It's just sometimes the wording hasn't been as clear as it might have
I think
been.
we're agreed on the intention, not the wording.
So, item 11, section 106 wish lists. We have a report from the town clerk. Thank you, town clerk.
May I just have a couple of comments before we discuss. Firstly, to note the overall point that it's clear to us now that in terms of generally with S106, what I strongly recommend we do in the future is not wait till we ask what we think, but when we have something come in, even if we disagree with it and seek to oppose it, we nonetheless debate what we want from S106 in all ramifications and shades and wherever that goes. So if we wait for somebody to ask us, we will probably lose, we may not have the opportunity ever, and conversations may already have taken place. So we need that confidence to be able to possibly strongly oppose, but also have a grown-up conversation about an S106 request if something did go ahead. That's my first recommendation. In terms, so the rest of the report refers specifically to sport and leisure contributions. You'll see there were two applications I've referred to. You'll see the numbers in there. What the report doesn't make clear, which I should have done, is that the numbers that have been given to us by Buckinghamshire Council are the sport and leisure contributions which will be left once the items actually on site have been included. So if it's a play area or a BMX contract. So the numbers there are what's left over in very rough terms, so they're not exact numbers, but they give you an idea what will be left over in terms of sport and leisure contributions from those sites once those things have been put in place.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, did you want to speak about this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could just, for members' information, this has all arisen following the Towns and Parishes Forum 2 weeks ago, when these questions are raised about why are towns and parishes not allowed more say at the early stages of section 106. They are now going to start changing this, and in fact you'll see the next 2 items on the agenda are actually requests from the sport and leisure officer about what we might want on 2 of the developments. One being Osier Way, 420 houses, where there's potentially 1.2 million in developed contributions, section 106 money, and on Moreton Road, phase 3, if and when that comes up, for us to consider 130 houses, which would be providing £340,000 in developers' contributions. This, what we're looking at tonight, is purely sport and leisure. That's playgrounds, open spaces, etc. There is a bigger picture than that about contributions to transport, to health, and of course also that's a transport idea, transport, health, and schooling. That's the other one. Education. That's the other provisions which we'll be looking at a later date. But what the clerk's given us tonight is what we should be looking at now and saying what we want now for sport and leisure for the moment, for these 2 major developments that are actually underway as we speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stuchbury, then Councillor Harvey.
I think that's very well put. I think we will discuss and will be discussing in future meetings lots of things to do with section 106. But I do think that it is evident and anodyne that we have to get sharper and we have to get more procedure and we have to get more definite. Let's hope that the new planning authority is far more inclusive and gives us space and the brevity to decide, the opportunity to propose, and hopefully they give us the clarity of their agreements. What's happened in the past is, despite all our changes, all our proposals, all our best efforts, all our whatever, we've always been behind the curve. And even as far as the historical district council, if you take a motion to ask to allow town and parishes to be involved in section 106 as the first thing, they were never fully understanding of the important role that the town plays and the parishes play in their local area. Let's just hope that this is the first step forward, that we actually get a better relationship going, one that actually reflects the needs of the community, so that we spend the money wisely in the community to improve the community. And this is a positive move forward. And I have no problem with the recommendations within it, and thank the town clerk for the time doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think being positive and finding good ways of communicating is the way forward.
Could I just add something to what I should have said before, just in terms of 2 recommendations I made in terms of S106 on those 2. Obviously, you could just go with my recommendation tonight. Rationale for that. It might be something that you think bears more discussion, so you could defer it back to annual labour council if there was some other way there was some more detailed discussion on that issue. Or something that's an obvious decision.
Councillor Harvey.
Okay, well, with regard to recommendation 1.1 on the town clerk's paper, I think that makes eminent sense. We need to get in our views on what the Section 106 agreement as a whole needs to address for our town. And that isn't just sport and leisure, it's also a wide range of other issues too. But I think we are constantly pushing at this door, because I think we constantly have good ideas that are sometimes overlooked. I mean, I can think of several times ago when all the council with this evening, of where had we been involved at an earlier stage, some major problems would have occurred later on. So I think for me, 1.1 is a given, and I would support the recommendation wholeheartedly, that we do take a pragmatic view and say, even though we're objecting to, and we'll probably always object to the Odium Way development, we recognise that it's now a reality, and therefore we will also at the same time say, if this does get approved, this is our recommendation, what the Section 106 agreement needs to include. With regards to 1.2, I'm a little bit more hesitant, because when we looked at the data later on in the report, it would seem to me that if we agree to this, then suddenly we're going to find that the skate park and other areas are not going to go ahead. Because it seems to suggest here that the cost of the skate park is going 200k. The Section 106 received is 135, 590 pounds, and there's a shortfall of 64,000. Now, if that isn't found, does that mean the skate park is now abandoned? Because we've been waiting for the skate park for years. The young people at the time who look at the skate park for probably even longer. It's been delayed and delayed for, I don't know the exact reason, but I know the town clerk is looking into it as we speak, probably has no reply back yet. It was at one point going to be done last summer. That didn't happen, which I'm glad about, because it meant that the young people failed it during the summer holidays. But then nothing has happened in the autumn and the winter, and here we are, now heading into the Easter holidays. And what's going to happen with that? I mean, the delay upon delay upon delay, and I'm worried that if we agree to this arts centre, which I approve of, then all of these other ideas, particularly the skate park, is somehow going to get put on the back burner again, and that I would object to.
Can we ask the town clerk to respond?
So especially in terms of the skate park, that this any decision we make does not affect the skate park. So all the money for the skate park has been allocated to specific S106 contributions from existing applications, so that will definitely go ahead. So this is just about another amount which will be added on to that list in the future. So it definitely doesn't affect the skate park.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you. Well, I also understand that there's been some additional complications with the Environment Agency, so that's caused a few extra problems in getting the final plans confirmed. But yeah, the town clerk has summarised the situation. In terms of the recommendations, I think they're sensible and pragmatic, and very much the view I've taken is that no matter how much you hate a planning application, you can't ignore the fact that there is a risk it gets approved, and you need to be engaged in what mitigations that can come out of it. Exactly the same issue in Moreton with the very old 170 houses, where the parish council has taken a very pragmatic view that it wants to be engaged in helping shaping the Section 106, and that is still ongoing. That debate is still happening. In terms of 1.2, it's a very old interest, but I was a trustee of the Buckingham Centre for the Arts, which was set up years ago, well before my time, to create a cultural venue for the town that morphed into the Film Place and got renamed as Buckingham Film Place. But I think the time has come for the need for a dedicated arts and cultural facility for North Bucks is now getting urgent. Even though we have 2 community centres of variable capacity, variable facilities, they are now pretty busy with the day-to-day stuff you expect to see in a community centre. So in terms of the cultural offer for the town, we are really lacking in space and dedicated facility in terms of sound quality and lighting and the rest of it. Now, we are lucky that the university has some facilities that they allow the town to use. But as the university expands post-COVID and it's got a growing ambition for its own students, then I'm sure that the availability of those spaces will be challenging. And of course, they do struggle to get external funding for those spaces because they are in private ownership. So I think 1.2 is a recommendation is very important. And I do think that actually the first stage of that 1.2 would be to actually allocate some funding towards I suppose, a feasibility study and generation of brief to understand what the cultural organisations of the town would benefit from, be that, you know, Buckingham Arts for All, right through to the music groups and stuff that we were talking about earlier, through to opportunities that we can't host in Buckingham, but we could do to improve the cultural offer of the town, because North Bucks doesn't have great cultural facilities, unless you want to travel to very specific concerts in Stowe School, or travel down to Aylesbury or Milton Keynes. So there's a great opportunity. And I would say that 1.2 is a great stepping stone towards that ambition.
Thank you. Councillor Try.
Yeah, 5.2 says that it's been changed from sports and leisure to sports and recreation. So going back a little bit, 4.6 actually states what the sports side is. And now drumming back down the paper to 6.2 says that leisure activities not involving sports are rarely considered. So we've still got sports and recreation now as a new title. Sports obviously heading it up first of all, but what comes under recreation?
Thank you. Councillor Mordew.
Of course, the 106 agreement is a legal agreement between the developer and the council, i.e. Buckinghamshire Council. If you want anything, I would make sure that what you want to use it for is specified in that contract. Do not just put in for leisure purposes, because that could be interpreted any way the Buckinghamshire Council wishes. It does not mean to say it would have to be spent in Buckingham. It could be spent in Aylesbury for leisure, the leisure centre there. And I have reason to say that. So the town clerk should make sure that the wording is correct. And it does specify where it's going to be used within reason. A 106 agreement is distinguished, different from the old homes bonus, which encouraged development. The 106 agreement is to help local communities with the infrastructure problems from a new development. And that's in the National Policy Planning Framework. However, it's being interpreted by the Buckinghamshire Authority that if you put in that it should be used for leisure purposes, it could be leisure purposes anywhere, or a sports field anywhere. It's not a retrospective discussion. It will probably be something that will go up for discussion and come back. Anything that's going through now, make sure it's specified where it's going to be used.
Thank you. Councillor Stuchbury and Councillor Harvey.
I think, paraphrasing some of what Councillor White said, it's long overdue that we have a cults and leisure. I first was privileged to hear someone wish to progress this project when Councillor Christine Strain-Clark was Mayor of Buckingham, and it's been an ongoing thing for many successive people. It's overdue. I take completely on board what Councillor Mordew said about making sure the paperwork and the agreement mentions Buckingham. It was only so obvious when the Tinget Road development came in, the sharp eyes of our planning clerk pointed out that the education contribution didn't actually say Buckingham on it some years ago, and pointed it out to me, and we made sure that the education contribution went to Buckingham. That was our planning clerk's sharp eyes. Not mine, I was the person who raised it, but she spotted it. So I think that's right. But what we should be aware of is we don't have the infrastructure levy benefit in Buckingham, and not likely to until the Buckinghamshire plan comes through. We also don't have the privilege of being so easily to allocate to health because of the Vale of Owsley plan. Was an historic plan 2013, but didn't take in consideration what Buckinghamshire Council did as a look at things. So we need to be specific and go for what we can achieve. When we will be getting new developments coming to Buckingham, we can work towards getting that. And of course, if we were to go for these things, we would always say Buckingham. If it's going to become, let's say, all the development in the north of Buckinghamshire gets developed and all the development goes into uplift goes into the south of the county, I'm sure Buckinghamshire Council will become a much more fragrant and volatile place to have a meeting. I'm sure that would cross across any persons who represent Buckingham. So I think the 2 points are easy. As I said earlier, I propose we accept them. This doesn't preclude us from adding anything else at a later stage. And that would be a discussion that the planning committee should do in conjunction with the local neighbourhood plan group who will be working on this. And we may add additional criteria and stuff at a later stage. But these two things have been things we've been wanting to get done for a very long time. So let's get that moved forward.
Councillor Harvey, then can we vote, please?
Well, I suggest we move to a vote.
Oh, thank you. Are we ready to move to vote on this? So shall we take the two recommendations separately? 1.1. Those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh,
me.
Oh, unanimous.
I was trying to get back to 1.1 to read it.
Oh, right. So that's unanimous. And then 1.2 regarding the arts and cultural venue. Those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Sorry? Okay, so that's dealt with items 11.1 and 11.2 as well. That's applied, so that's good. So item 12, Buckinghamshire Plan Consultation. The survey, we had a copy of Councillor Harvey's response, I believe.
Yeah.
What else do we need to? Appendix C.
There's appendix C, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's appendix C.
If I may, just while the mayor's clicking through, just remind you, I did email round to all, myself or Neil, email round to all councils asking for views as a response some time ago. And Councillor Harvey is the only response I've had to that.
We win.
The deadline for response.
I don't think I saw that either.
No,
I think I was off that list.
It's in the agenda as appendix C.
Yeah.
However we got to where we are, and I'll check and I apologise if I didn't. I think I did. I may not have done. The deadline for responses is Friday. So we either agree a response now or we agree a quick working group with members during the week if members would rather do it that way to agree a response. All members could circulate views to me afterwards and agree to delegate to lead the decision based on any additional feedback I received between now and then.
Councillor Harvey.
Well, obviously, I propose that my answers become the council. Obviously, is what I would propose, but I'm also happy to. The wording will need to be changed. We've got to use the first person and so on, but the essence is there. And I suspect that most people around the table would agree with most of that. Maybe, but then we're not going to get involved in the detailed point by point discussion on this either, are we?
Not this evening.
But a working party is another alternative, but obviously I propose that you just take my wording and amend it to make it more sensible. It's coming from the council rather than the individual.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll second that
Yeah.
with the fact that we're going to be discussing the Buckinghamshire Plan for a very, very long time, and we're all going to get further opportunities, and the Buckinghamshire Neighbourhood Plan will give us, Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan will give us opportunities ample to discuss that. So John wins the prize for the most either seeing the email or reacting to the email tonight, and thankfully he did.
Thank you. Are we able to vote on that now?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Those in favour of that, please, or did you want to speak, Councillor?
Well, just to quickly speak, because I thought it was just attached to the agenda as for information, not something we're going to vote on. So I must admit I've not read it in great detail. So I feel uncomfortable being cornered into voting for an appendix as council policy. Particularly, I mean, there's one that actually goes against what we've just discussed about section 106 starter business units. And that's a very interesting idea, but we need to have a discussion if that's actually a priority for the section 106 we've just discussed. I don't know how the town council wants to.
So I did try to talk. The deadline is Friday, which causes a slight issue. So unless Councillor White and Councillor Harvey wanted to have an email exchange or consider views and come to consensus with me before Friday.
Well, I've already done my own personal one, so I thought we were just being shared a personal response for information.
I think
not that we're going to use this as a council response.
I think I share that with you.
So I suppose we have the option, obviously all of us could respond individually and probably should respond individually. The question is whether we want to respond as a town council or whether it's sufficient for us all to respond individually. Councillor Harvey.
Just to repeat, I have proposed a motion.
Yeah.
Which
is on.
And we were at the point of voting on that.
Can we move to the vote?
Yeah.
Can we move to that vote? If you vote for it, fine. If you don't vote for it, also fine. I believe in democracy.
And we have
So,
heard of the alternative.
We've heard of various alternatives.
Indeed, this is the second time that Councillor Harvey wants to have democracy, but also wants to curtail debate and move to the vote.
Well, we have got that on the table. We were going to move to a vote.
Well, no, you have to take council.
Councillor Marvin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that yes, Councillor White and Councillor Harvey should get together as the town clerk proposed and then come to a consensus of what we really want to respond as a council.
Thank you.
That way we'll satisfy everyone.
So that would require councillors Harvey and White to feel up to that, to be prepared to do that.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite right to be delegating that way.
Look, can I propose we move to the vote? If the vote, as Councillor Harvey suggests, isn't agreed, then we can move to the other options. That's council procedures. I think everything everybody says is relevant. What Councillor White said, everyone said relevant. What we are doing now is making it about the only individual who responded to the town clerk in time, and then we're trying to micromanage what the individual said. I'm a little uncomfortable in doing that at this stage, to be honest. I should have done it earlier.
Thank you. So we're going to vote on that, whether to accept Councillor Harvey's response as the town council's response. Those in favour of that, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Those against?
1, 2.
And abstentions?
1, 2.
Thank you. Well, that motion is carried. So it's up for the town clerk to take that forward, and then, and as I would encourage all of us to respond individually.
I'm going to fill a consultation and see if I can win next time.
This is something we're going to be revisiting. Item 13, to receive and question reports from Buckinghamshire Council Councillors. We have 3 here. Should we do it alphabetically by surname?
No, I did it first last time.
Oh, did you?
Okay,
Councillor.
Given the time, I'll be very brief on a couple of things we've not touched on this evening. One is someone will be aware that the bypass will be closed overnight for the next 2 or 3 days between Burley Peace and Sporting Road. Isn't it?
Yes, 7:30 to 5 a.m.
And I have asked for clarification because I know I was going to be asked this tonight if a certain depression near the bridge will be covered in those works, but I haven't had confirmation of that.
Good luck with that.
But our local area technician is well aware of that issue, so if it got into the works order or not, who knows. We had a very useful meeting back a couple of weeks ago with our HGV Town Centre project. It was delayed a bit with COVID and reassignment of staff, but that's now back on progress. And I think we're getting close to something that will answer a number of the issues that have been raised around Wall Street and the town centre and weight restrictions. So hopefully we'll get an update on that before Easter, if not the end of the financial year. And just as we've been talking about trees a lot, we were pleased to be able to finally get the Cornwall Meadow empty tree pits finally refilled. So we've probably seen some new trees down in the bottom corner towards the Verney Close Spinney. The tree officer is really pleased to be able to get them because they're pretty difficult to get hold of that particular species, but he's very happy to get some matching ones. And finally, I had a very productive meeting with the new area manager for planning enforcement. And we do appear to have a bit of a backlog of planning enforcement matters, which I'm sure you'll be well aware of in the planning committee. And we are probably one of the worst parishes in the county for backlog. Hopefully now with new staff members appointed, they'll be cracking through that very quickly. And hopefully we'll have some better progress on enforcement. But I think it's wait and see on outcomes. But hopefully over the coming months that will be good news.
So that sounded like good news. Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Stuchbury.
Yeah, paraphrasing the traffic meeting, which we were all present at, all good news. That'll come to the town council, I believe, at a later stage. That's good news. I've been having discussions with officers regarding Osier Way, officers regarding Tindrick Road, cycleway routes, officers around lots of section 106 and Lace Hill. All that stuff's going to go to, rather than go into it tonight, it's going to go to a future council meeting to be discussed in length. Also, I've attended every finance meeting of the council, so I understood the budget. I'll rephrase that. So I had a chance to understand the budget. Anyone who can understand the budget that size is probably been slightly optimistic. And I've been to education to age question about speech therapy in the sense that making sure that was addressed. I've been to health committees in respect to the fact that we were looking at the changes in health services, one being the community hubs coming through, where I had opportunity to question the chief executive of the trust, and I managed to, in my questioning, get out of him the poignant words that we've been waiting for, which Councillor Mark Cole said to me before the meeting, is that he said on record he has no intention of removing hospital beds, even if we have a community hub come into Buckingham, which has been certainly lacking in correspondence to this council for a long time. But we now have it on the webcast, and I've snipped the recording of it. So that's so if that changes, we can go back to that. It gives the community a great feeling of relief, because it's a continuing churn, this subject. So that's good. I also will be attending and have been attending and will be attending the Fire Authority, which will be set in the Fire Authority budget. You must be aware that the Fire Authority to this point has got a deficit in its budget, and that's got to be addressed one way or another. The only way that can be addressed is either through, there's only two things the Fire Authority do where there's any resources. One is to fire stations, the other one is the staff, which is their resources. So all decisions are negative. So hopefully they've come up with some inventive way to fill the gap, which probably could be close. There's £1 million, but it could be close to 400,000, depending how you look at the figures. I've also been doing lots of constituency work, which is your job. And what is evident to me is that I was in my correspondence only today, that why I shared the bridge with Councillor White in the between the two divisions, which is in Buckingham. And that seems to be not addressed. So if he gets back a notice that he's managed to get the deficits addressed on his side, please send them to the other side where there's also some dents. But the problem, which is a recurring one, which was the 2 days before the planning application was agreed for Osier Way for 420 houses, they announced that they couldn't shut the road because it would cause disruption to mend the divot in the road. 2 days later, they gave applications for 400 houses, which will cause a lot of disruption on that road. So I'm not too sure where we go with that, but we all share, no matter whether we're on the left or the right or whatever, we would like our industrial park to have a decent piece of highway. And quite frankly, that divot in that road and that bump's been there for near a decade. And I think we should all go up there and cut a cake and celebrate the inability of now 2 authorities have been able to mend that road. Because it is, hopefully the developer will pick it up, but that's a further thing. It's gone on for long enough, and it is embarrassing, isn't it, that isn't made. And lastly, I just say that it was a pleasure to be in the town centre with the mayor and planting trees the other day. And thanks to Councillor Sue Hetherington, who provided, correct me if I'm wrong, the male species of the tree, the female species of the tree. Trees will be much happier together than they would have been if they'd have just been a single sex plantation. So that was positive, but you know, that's enough, and I could go on for an hour, as you know, but that would be enough.
Thank you, Councillor Stuchbury. Councillor Mordew.
I'll go and plug out an hour, I think.
Yeah, follow that.
What intrigued me is why somebody should move a tree that's already been planted in Moreton Meadow. Anyway, it's, you know, apart from everything that's been going on as planning and standards, and been to 2 drainage board meetings on Zoom, fortunately. It's the HAZAC and the subcommittee that I'm on that's for me has been more interesting, because trying to understand how the primary care network, the patient guidance system works in conjunction with the ICS and the BOBs, when they don't even know what the answer is mind-blowing. And this new idea of ICS, which is the integrated care system, and the BOBs legislation was due to come in April, I think it was. Then it was May, now it's July. I did ask the people from the Buckingham Health Trust, is it ever going to happen? And they said, oh yes, it will happen. And it'll happen when they say it will happen. But when that is, I don't know. But it's interesting to see, because we interviewed the Swan practice, how they stack up with some of the other surgeries and patient participation groups in the county. And they do very a lot. Some of the primary care networks have an administrator to look after the doctors, but they're still individual doctors. And that's always the problem. But I'm just waiting for the report to come out, because we've got a very good officer who's summarising everything. All the meetings are recorded, not for public consumption, but just to help their notes, which I think is quite a good way. It'd be more accurate when the report comes out.
But do you agree with me, Howard, that we need to go to acronym school?
To what?
We need to go to acronym school soon to understand all these things.
Well, you only got to look at the sheet that Town Clerk gave out to understand. I've learned what BOBs are and all the rest of it. But we talk about Schedule 106, just so we get to know and love it. It's going to change to SIL in a few years' time. So anyway, life is fun.
Thank you. Did I see a hand up? Councillor Try.
You did.
Is there a question?
Yeah, may I ask councillors if any consideration has been given to parking through the town when the bypass is closed? Because there are some bottlenecks, dare I say, although not picking it out, the air squadron, you know, when they meet, it is quite a congested thing just at that point.
It is overnight road work.
Yeah, I know, well, that's when they meet, and all their parents and
even chucking out times about 9 o'clock. And I'm beginning to through there, I'm waiting to follow it. We're okay now, Martin.
Councillor Willett.
I was just wanted to ask councillors an update on the Buckingham Council's application for the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that Councillor Ralph was working on and Councillor Stuchbury. What is the situation on that currently?
Does anybody have any update on that?
Well, it's the speed limit can be introduced by the town council because they would have to, it has to be paid for by the Buckingham Town Council and it has to fulfill certain criteria regarding distance where the signs are. Cllr Road's an interesting one, which I'm sure we will get something done. And you did mention about heavy goods vehicles coming through the town and making it one-way street. As part of the management scheme, to introduce a heavy goods vehicle restriction, it would have to be put in at Brackley, which is being looked at.
Thank you. Councillor Stuchbury, then Councillor White.
Just to say that it's imprecise. Lots of people had lots of views on it. The application predates you joining the council in the sense, and town clerk, correct me if I'm wrong, that it went in. It went in before the decision of the 24th of November of Buckinghamshire Council, which is what Councillor Morge is rightfully referring to. Other applications were agreed, this one wasn't. My emails that I received from officers said that there was discussion between the chair of the community board on a wide range of transport issues, but I don't think that's the reason that it hasn't been progressed, because I didn't think that was a negative issue, but it has been delayed and we still haven't had, to myself, unless any member around here knows differently, I haven't had a response to my correspondence asking where it is. And I questioned the cabinet member at full council, which was on the webcast, and I said, is it a coincidence, all these things? And he said, yes. That was his response when I pointed out how these things all happened. So I do think that we are due a written response. Either the application doesn't qualify or it does qualify, because it was well before the decision of the council that application was put in. And it might be that it still qualifies, but that will be a legal job for the Buckinghamshire Council Community Board officers and, I presume, the cabinet member to decide.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Well, just to say that I'm not particularly happy with that. The process is not as clear and simple and straightforward as it should be. And I've made that point to various people at Buckinghamshire Council. But one thing that will hopefully improve matters going forward is that the community board will finally have a full-time permanent coordinator, which has been the issue over the last 12 months. By not having that dedicated resource. So hopefully going forward, I think it's any day now, that will hopefully improve matters generally about the community board.
Thank you.
But you, like me, have no response on it, not been given anything, have we?
Thank you. Can we move on to item 14, the Environment Bill? We've had the letter from Greg Smith in response to our town clerk. So, Councillor White.
I probably should declare an interest that I work part-time for the MP.
Okay.
So I will take guidance with that.
Okay. Did anybody want to make a comment, or should we note the letter and I think it raised some helpful points there. Is that agreed? We just note that letter?
Yes, agreed.
Thank you. Move on to the Boundary Commission, and we've had another report from the town clerk on this important issue. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, looking through the report, I mean, obviously the reason we've got 4 wards was a glitch created by the redrawing of the boundaries when Aylesbury Vale changed their boundaries to accommodate differential numbers of population and so forth. And that was a bit of an odd thing to have done, as it were. It was inevitable because of where the boundaries were drawn. But I think if we've got the opportunity that we now have, which means we'll probably end up, I assume, with similar sort of boundaries maybe but certainly that town divided in half, that we should go back to what we had before. Because it worked fairly well, the north and the south. I don't see any reason to change from that.
Thank you. Councillor White and Councillor Stuchbury.
It's probably a bit pedantic, but it's probably worth clarifying in the agenda, or at least the report, that this is the local government boundary review. Because of course there are 2 boundary commissions currently active in the patch, with parliamentary and council boundaries. Obviously, we were talking about council boundaries here, but I think the points that Councillor Harvey make are sound. The quirkiness of the Fisher's Field and
Highlands.
Highlands, and it's just it should never have happened, but it was just a quirk of numbers at that time. So if we could fix that at this point, that'd be good.
Thank you, Councillor Stuchbury.
I totally concur with that. It was to fix numbers in other wards to do with district seats, not the Buckinghamshire Council. But I do think we have to take the step forward of the further decision that if we get a chance to comment at the next stage, which will be after that we are presently on the 2015 numbers 2 councillors short on this council, which is, we took that decision because of smaller room, and we took that decision for various things. I think it's an important decision that we're denying opportunities for other people to join us, or we don't think they do want to join us. But we have to take a decision where we take up the 2 presently. If you look at the amount of every council in any equation, I presume that the Boundary Commission will come up with a figure of how many representatives that a unitary council should represent based upon where it is, and that will probably help them draw their boundaries. But we also, as town councillors, there's a figure for how many representatives a town councillor should represent and how many it should, or he or she should have. So I think we do need to consider that as a separate issue at a later stage, whether we want to do that, to have a proper discussion about it based upon all the things that were the prejudice, not tonight, but I think we need to consider it.
Yes, we haven't got that on the agenda.
No, but it says,
All boundaries on the agenda.
but if you do change the boundaries back, you need to discuss that, because you can go back to the paper of 2015 and what was decided why we didn't do it. That might be that what people said in 2015 is still very current now, but I do think we have to look at that. But all things being equal, the Boundary Commission do say that they can spot gerrymandering at a mile, so that just gives you heart.
Thank you. So I get the sense that people agree that we should amalgamate the 2 small wards into the others. So we've got, and that we should probably be coterminous with whatever wards come from Buckinghamshire Council once they're would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, would make sense.
Are we?
Let's make Buckingham all one ward.
Happy with that? Should agree?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll do that.
And maybe the issue that Councillor Stuchbury raised is for a future meeting.
Yeah, indeed.
Contested elections.
Item 16, Food Connect, Stratford Road.
So the brief update on this is matters are delayed. So following illness, we've agreed some delay. So I'll get back to you at a future point with more details.
Thank you. Reports from representatives on outside body. Verbal report from Councillor Harvey from the Milton Keynes Association of Local Councillors, Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, I need to report 2 things really. It's Carol Persman, who's been the stoic county officer for many years really, is finally retiring. So I think it would be nice if this town council sent their appreciation and thanks to her for her service. And she's been replaced by Mrs. Marinda Wolf, who's been appointed. She's formerly a deputy county officer. She's also been, I'm not sure if she still is, but certainly has been a parish councillor and a clerk as well, and was chosen as the best person to replace Carol. So that's just news from BM Cal. All councillors, but if we can send a letter of appreciation to Carol, I think that would be nice.
Everybody agree with that? Thank you.
Yeah.
Another one for me. Thank you very much.
And received the minutes of the Pontio group. Shall we note those
No,
minutes?
yes,
Thank you.
noted.
Are
Very
there any
long,
other
aren't
updates from anybody? No? In which case, we'll note the mayoral engagements.
they? Yeah, busy one.
Chair's announcements, just, sorry, Councillor.
There's a, may want to, we've received an email during the meeting, which you may want to read out as one of your chair's announcements.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, from Peter Bonham, who's the warrant officer for the Air Cadets, just to say, could you please on your next council meeting, thank all those who turned out for us on Saturday. The weather was just right and we've had good feedback. So it's nice because they had the new standard was presented on Saturday morning outside the old very nice occasion.
okay.
So can we know the mayoral engagements?
Yep.
Chair's announcement, just to remind you, it's the civic service this Saturday.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing those of you who have responded. Thank you. And the date of the next meeting, interim council on the 7th of March, is preceded by an informal meeting, and the full council on the 28th of March. That concludes our business. Thank you for your patience.
Well done.